Hey, have you ever stopped to think that maybe your greatest strength is also your biggest weakness? Well, today we're going to dive into that very idea with a really fascinating story, the parable of the Precursor. He's this figure of incredible power, but he's defined by one single critical flaw.
And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? What if those qualities we admire so much, like absolute certainty, simplicity, unwavering strength, what if they're actually holding us back from something much, much deeper? All right, so let's get into it. Let's meet this central figure, the Precursor. And he's presented as a man of just absolute, unshakable certainty. His whole world, his entire being, is built on a foundation that has never, ever known a single crack. I mean, the parable paints this incredible picture of him out in the wilderness, literally living on locusts and wild honey. And this isn't just about survival. It's about him being the embodiment of raw physical power. The source material calls it a brute, animalistic health. He's totally in tune with his body and the physical world around him.
And right here, this is where the central problem really snaps into focus. See, the Precursor totally gets the body's hunger. It's coarse, it's simple, it's something he knows. But he is completely 100% clueless about the sicknesses of the spirit. Those are delicate, they're complex, and to him, they're totally unknown. And that disconnect, that's going to define his whole story.
So you gotta ask, right? Why were people so drawn to this guy? Well, think about it. In a world full of confusion, his raw power and his strong words, they offered this incredible sense of clarity. He brought this new kind of harsher form of righteousness. But the real kicker, he was certain. And people flocked to that unwavering conviction like flies on honey.
And this right here, this just nails his whole philosophy. He didn't see his life as his own adventure. Nope. He believed his only purpose was to be a straight, simple road for someone greater who was coming after him. But the parable immediately challenges that, saying, wait a minute, that's the opposite of life. A real life isn't the straight road for somebody else, it's a crooked, winding path you take to find yourself.
Okay, so this is where the story really starts to turn. We're going to start picking apart that whole idea of certainty and dive into what the source calls the sickness of the spirit.
And bam, there it is, the big question. The parable makes us ask, was this celebrated simplicity, this absolute certainty, was it actually a weakness in disguise? Was his greatest virtue, in fact, his most profound flaw?
And here's the thing you really have to get. His strength was totally raw, completely untested. It was the strength of a will that had never had to fight itself, never had to question its own beliefs, or stare into the abyss of its own doubt. It was a primitive kind of power, not a refined, self-aware one.
And you see, this is exactly why he was so unequipped for the world that was coming. His simple mindset just had no room for things like anxiety or deep-seated doubt or the constant uncertainty that pretty much defines our inner lives. He was basically a relic of an old world, and he was fundamentally unable to get a handle on the new struggles of a world where all those old certainties were starting to die.
So, this all leads to the end of the Precursor's life. And it's a pretty simple end, which, ironically, kicks off a far more complex beginning for everyone who came after him.
So, how did it end? It was fast. He was beheaded, all for speaking a simple truth to a powerful king. His death was just like his life. Direct, straightforward, and all for some uncomplicated ideal. No gray areas, no ambiguity. But, and this is a huge but, his physical death wasn't the end of the story. The parable tells us that while his body was gone, something else stuck around, something that would live on for generations, his shadow.
And we're not talking about some fond memory here. No way. His legacy is described as a monstrous, horrible shadow that haunts the caves of our minds. And that shadow? It represents the dangerous appeal of his simple certainty. That constant temptation we all feel to just retreat to black and white answers when we're facing a complex gray world.
All right, so in this last part, let's talk about the legacy of that shadow. We're now in that new world he could never understand, the world of complexity and doubt that we all have to figure out how to navigate.
I mean, just look at the difference here. It's night and day. The Precursor's world was all about prophets and certainties, built on what felt like a solid rock of truth. Our struggle today, it's all internal. We're not wrestling with kings, we're wrestling with ourselves, with nihilism, and with the really, really hard job of creating our own meaning.
So the message from the parable is pretty blunt. That old world, the Precursor's world of simple prophets and absolute answers, it's gone. It's dead. And there's no going back.
So you might be thinking, well, what was the point of him then? He was a signpost.
But get this, he wasn't pointing to some final answer or a savior. He was pointing toward a new kind of journey, a struggle he himself could never have imagined. He cleared the way, not for an easy answer, but for a much deeper, more challenging question.
And that, right there, is the punchline of the whole story. The precursor thought he was just a road to something else. But the parable's final, profound insight is that he had it all wrong. There is no single destination we're all marching toward. The meaning is found in the walk itself. The crooked, uncertain, questioning path. That is the destination. Which kind of leaves us with a final question for ourselves, right? Are you walking your own winding path? Or are you trying to be a straight, simple road for someone else's truth?